running a deep tech or building a deep tech company is not for the faint of heart. It's running any business, building any business is hard enough. Building a tech business is especially hard. Building a deep tech business, I think, is the hardest of the lot. And there are going to be certain people who are drawn to that challenge. As I think about it, the very hard bit has something to do with innovating at scale. Okay? We're taking something novel that's generally IP rich, often been born in a research lab or a university, and we're creating a solution out of this, and a solution that is going to perform and is going to be stable and is going to integrate commercially and technologically with other members of a particular value chain, where the value chain often has very entrenched or established participants, other large corporates involved, who are going to act as integration or distribution or commercial partners of some kind. Yeah? And we've got to not only get the solution to that point, but we've got to also make the solution very scalable, with all of the considerations that go into that, bill of materials and the ease of processing or production and unit economics, all of the stuff that goes into making a solution, taking a solution and scaling it to that level. That's what we have to do. But we have to do it with a solution that is inherently innovative. And we've got to do that again and again. Corporates, the big companies, they can't do this. If they could do it, they would do it. And there wouldn't really be a need for these kinds of companies to exist. But in a way, because they can't do it, these companies must exist. And so that's the challenge that they present. Now, in other areas of the tech universe, let's take software as an example. There are operating models or frameworks or playbooks on which business builders or leaders, founders can anchor themselves, and which can act as guides as they're developing and scaling their business. It's still very difficult to build and run a software business, but these operating models help a lot because there have been so many software companies that have been through, and lots of precedent in terms of successful software and different types of software models. In deep tech, which is not a sector but an umbrella term that encompasses lots of different sectors, we have no such luxury. We don't have existing operating models or frameworks or playbooks on how to run one of these companies. Okay? And that's for a few reasons. One, because there are so many different domains which fall under the term deep tech. We've got things from artificial intelligence to semiconductors to quantum computing to advanced materials, each with their own dynamics, their own business models, and so it wouldn't be appropriate to layer one way of scaling these businesses. It's not appropriate or realistic. But there are tools that can be used, I think, that can act as guides in some way, and that, in our experience, we have found very helpful when we've been evaluating businesses. And I'll talk about, I guess, two of those tools now. One is technology readiness levels, also known as TRLs, and the other is manufacturing readiness levels, or MRLs. Now, these terms will be familiar to anyone who works in science and engineering. They are a way of measuring technology development progress. For the TRLs, of course, there's a system where 1 represents the least mature technology and 9 represents the most mature technology. TRLs were developed by NASA in the 1970s to track technology development programs related to the Apollo mission. And so they've got a certain level of rigor, but also simplicity in their application, and so they can act as useful guides. Manufacturing readiness levels were created by the US Department of Defense when it came to the manufacturability of weapon systems. And so again, a similar level of rigor and simplicity in terms of application. When we, as an executive search firm, are evaluating potential companies in order to kind of gauge where they're at and to understand their progress, to understand the likely challenges and milestones they're going to have coming up, we use TRLs and MRLs to increase our understanding. And when you're going, once you have that, those anchor points, you can start to layer different types of models on top of that. You can start to anticipate what some of the leadership or management expectations are going to be, the skills, experience, and talent that's going to be required in order to get through the current milestone and the forthcoming milestones too. So that then gets into this concept of what we've termed the lab-to-market leadership model. So what does lab-to-market leadership actually mean? Many people have asked me this. I'm not sure I've always had the right answer, but I feel it's about anticipating the skills, talent, and experience likely to be required as a deep tech company moves from the research phase of their lab-to-market journey through to prototype, pilot, first of a kind, and market deployment. The different phases of technology readiness levels. Anticipating those skills, requirements, and talents at the leadership and management level, that for me feels what lab-to-market leadership is all about. And suffice to say that a leadership model for a lab-to-market company is going to be different for every company. Because for one, every company is starting from a different point. We've got different teams with different levels of experience. In some companies, we're going to have founder teams. That's quite common, where there is a lot of brilliance in terms of innovation, but not much experience in terms of management or leadership. We have, and we contrast that with other companies where you have very experienced leadership teams and management teams, but maybe not as much experience on innovation. So the starting points are a little different. You've got different resources in companies, and that impacts the lab-to-market leadership model as well. Companies are going to be capitalized at different levels. And then, of course, there are different sectors. Running a lab-to-market leadership model for an AI or a quantum company is going to look very different than a chemical engineering or an advanced manufacturing or robotics company. So there's not a one-size-fits-all here. So the onus is on the companies themselves to think about their own lab-to-market journey and to anticipate the skills, experience, and talents they're going to need in order to have a chance of making it from the lab to the market. Now, in an ideal world, every company would set out and they'd have all functional heads accounted for at the word go. Yeah? They'd have all of the different perspectives, they'd have all of the different talent, and they'd be mulling over the challenge of innovation at scale in a particular area. They'd be mulling that over from day one. But that's going to be pretty expensive to do. Not always, that in and of itself isn't very scalable. So, but what I do think every company needs to consider is, at the very least, bringing on board the different perspectives, making sure all of those different perspectives are accounted for when they're starting out, so that they're not building in a vacuum and releasing a product that they're very proud of but no one really cares about or knows about. And that leads them to wind up push tech to a market that doesn't really care, and to wind up failing quickly, or worse, taking a long time to fail, which sadly is something that we see happen a lot. So lab to market leadership modeling is about anticipation of those and the consideration of those different perspectives from day one. Even if you can't have functional heads from day one, you at least need those different perspectives active, interrogating the solution that's being built, and planning the kind of requirements that are going to give a company a chance of making it.